Emily and I today have a preview for Karma Games' next game. This one's called Peninsula. It is not as grand and big as a game as Clans of Caledonia Industria, which we just did on the channel. This is a flip and write where we are playing architects trying to sort of form the landscape on our sheet. It has kind of a twist though, because when you're adding to that landscape, you also have to move around in order to do so.
Yes, yes. Some would say we are actually penning in our own little island.
That is true, exactly what we're doing. Everyone's going to have a sheet, as you can see here, as well as a big player aid that tells you just about everything you need to know to play the game. It's two-sided, so you have literally all the information you need. And then this here, which is a bunch of cards, doesn't necessarily represent anything you're going to be taking. It represents a very variable setup because there's a few different cards here. You're going to have these bonus cards. These are going to be the same, the 1 through 6, but then you're going to randomly, if you want, place the actual bonuses that you can unlock with those down here. These are the landmarks that you're going to be discovering or trying to locate or get to on your map as you fill it out. Up here, you have some missions that you're trying to complete, and as you do those, you're going to be able to acknowledge that on your sheet, as well as doing so to unlock some additional ways to movement. And then up here, you have 5 of the cards that would ultimately be in this deck. Those will not be used in the game, but there's going to be a deck of cards with these cards that you choose from each round. The active player is effectively just going to choose one of those cards.
Yeah, so what we're actually doing on your turn is very simple. I'm going to say, okay, I want this one. I'm going to take the tunnel, and then everyone else at the table is going to be able to take the tree.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pick somewhere on my board where I can do a tunnel, but not just anywhere, right? It has to be next to where my architect is. So before or after my turn, I can choose to move. We start with 2 boots and a harbor or a sail, and we can use the boot to move 1 space, which isn't a lot, right?
It isn't a lot, and when you use it, you cross off the boot. We don't get a lot of movement to begin with. Like Emily said, you just have those 2 boots and the harbor action. There's some air balloon ones, but you have to unlock those by getting certain icons. Like, for example, this tree. Once you get 3 trees filled in, you're able to actually get an air balloon. Once you have 5, you get another air balloon. Once you do some of these missions, if you do the right ones, you're able to unlock more movement. But moving is really important because you have to be able to move around in order to write in some of those symbols. Because when you do take a card, you can write the symbol in. That's one option. Or you can say, I'm going to give up the symbol. I'm not going to use the symbol this turn, and I'm going to use it as a free movement. So you can use a movement to get things going so you can set up your next turn a little bit better.
And when you put icons on your player board, you're putting them in not filled in. So if I were to take the secret tunnel, I can put it and put it right there, or put a new one and put it right here, right? This secret tunnel connects to all of the other tunnels. So if I use a movement to go onto it, now I can go from here to here, to here, to here, to here. I have so many more options on my board. But this is an end game state, right?
Yes.
So at the beginning of the game, there's not usually that many options.
Yeah, you're barely moving around at the beginning of the game, and you don't want to just freely, willy-nilly use those movements that you have because you really want to keep those as long as you can. Those bonuses that Emily was just talking about, like the tunnels and some of the other things that you can draw on your map, will give you what they call infrastructure bonuses, so that when you move, like she said, when you move onto a tunnel, it's effectively every tunnel, so you can freely move to the other tunnels. When you move on to one of the villages, which is the little house that you're going to draw, whenever you draw one of those houses, you're going to choose one of the sides of the hex to do a double-arrowed arrow.
Like a bidirectional arrow.
Yeah, to go away. If you're on one of those villages and you choose to move, for free, without using one of your little movement icons, you can move in the direction of that arrow, or even if you're next to a house, you can move onto that house using that same arrow. The boats are somewhat similar, but those are just one way off of the boat. So there are some things you're going to be adding. So when you choose your cards, that is one route you can take, is get a lot of those things to put on your map such that you can kind of freely move as much as possible. When we played, Emily took a little bit more of that route where she had a better infrastructure. I was trying to unlock the bonuses, but I did get to a point where, in my last turn, I used my last bits of movement that I possibly could to do a little thing at the end.
And for those bonuses, for those missions, you have to do different symbols, because each one of these symbols, so once you've done one of them, you could say like, okay, these 2 are fulfilling B, these two tunnels, because they're one away from each other. Anything with the X has to be a different marker, right? Anything with the check marks has to be the exact same one. So if later in the game, I might also put another tunnel in between, now it doesn't qualify. So I have to try to do them kind of early on, or not mess up all of these different plans I have going. And once you do one, you're going to actually mark it there with which icon you used. So now if I've used tunnels for that one, I cannot use tunnels for any of the others.
Yeah, that's probably the trickiest part of those missions. And it should be said, this is a prototype. Not only will the components potentially change, but they are tweaking and looking at the rules constantly. But the way we played it here is it made those things most challenging to say, do I want to use my tunnels for that right now? Yeah, because I could use this one for the other one. Some of these are somewhat similar.
Yeah.
So you're going to want to divvy those up across all of the 6 different icons, which we mostly successfully did.
Yeah, I didn't do my first one because I actually thought it would be the easiest. And then I never got to it because my last thing that I had left was mountains. And I just didn't want to take more mountains because all of them score differently. So when you actually are able to shade it in, it's going to score you points at the end. So for villages, you're going to get to shade them in if they have 4 unique icons around them.
Which is rough. The villages are probably one of the more challenging ones. I mean, once the board gets filled up, it's easier to shade those in. And you are shading them in as you play. Yes. The boats are going to shade in as long as something's next to it with an arrow pointing into it. So there's a lot of different things that are sort of informing your decisions about how you want to place, where you want to place, and what you want to choose when you're drafting those cards. It's the infrastructure that you want to build so that you can move around. If you're too focused on the things that are scoring you points, you might not set up that infrastructure, so your game might
start stalling
a little bit until you try to pivot. So you kind of have to balance all those things.
There's a little bit of flexibility though, because on your turn you can either, like we said, use the icon and draw it. You can use it to trade and actually get a movement, or you can use a life preserver if you have one.
Yes.
You have more and a higher player count, and you can actually use that to say, I'm going to take the same icon that the active player used. So if I was using the tunnel and you guys were using the parks, you could say, no, I'm going to use the tunnel too, because I need more infrastructure somewhere.
Yeah, and that is key. Because as those cards come out and you are trying to do a number of things, but in particular get some of those bonuses by completing these things, if someone's hogging all of the same icon then when they come up, you're going to have to use the life preserver to use that instead. Although we didn't have to use, I don't think we used ours.
I don't think we used ours, no, yeah. I liked my choices.
But yeah, you're setting all of those things up and scoring points all over the place. Not only are you scoring in for the shaded in items that you've been able to shade in, and it should be said too, the tunnels aren't shaded in while you play. At the end of the game, tunnels are only shaded in as long as they're not right next to or adjacent to another tunnel. Which is kind of how you want to build them out anyway, because you want the tunnels spread around
next to each other.
It doesn't really help you too much. You're also going to score points though for all of these things that you've completed. There's points on these cards according to what you're trying to achieve. You add all those up and then go line by line with all of these different things you can score, getting your final score. In our game, it was pretty close.
Very close.
Emily came out on top, 83 to 80.
Just 3 points.
But it is a really interesting game in terms of having to move around. I mean, you've played a lot of games like this where you're flipping something over and writing something down. Sometimes you can write them anywhere you want. Sometimes you have to write them adjacent to something you've already written in. This one, you have this architect, and you have to move them around. So if you're stuck in the corner here and you don't have a lot of ways to like, okay, I'll use one movement icon to go here, and then I can, from there, go just about anywhere I want to on my map, or at least get further, then you're going to find yourself needing to focus a little bit more on the infrastructure and a little less on the scoring, at least in the short term.
Yes.
So that is Peninsula from Karma Games. If you have any questions about it, please make them in the comments below. We'll get down there and answer whatever we can. There's a number of different mission cards, a number of different these bonus cards that come into the game. A big long list that do wildly different things than here. I mean, these are all the bonuses for this. Different maps on the different sides of the paper. I don't know how many maps they will have, but check out their campaign page to see that. But like I said, get down there in the comments. Let us know what you think. Until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.